There's a snail living in the deepest part of the ocean right now, nearly 5 miles below the surface where the pressure would crush you instantly. And its shell is made partly of iron. Iron, like armor forged in darkness. This creature exists in conditions so extreme that scientists didn't think complex life was possible there. And yet it thrives, building its metallic shell one molecule at a time in water that's barely above freezing and utterly black. And that's just one snail, one species, in a group of animals that includes over 60,000 different kinds of creatures, living in nearly every environment on Earth. Right now, as you listen to this, there are snails in deserts that seal themselves inside their shells for years waiting for rain. Snails in trees that never touch the ground. Snails in caves that have lost their eyes because they've lived in darkness for so many generations that sight became unnecessary. And we're about to explore why these slow, seemingly simple creatures are among the most successful, most diverse, most quietly extraordinary animals that have ever existed. If you're new here, welcome. I'm grateful you've chosen to spend this time exploring something profound. This is a space dedicated to understanding the world's most fascinating subjects in a calm, meditative way, where knowledge becomes a companion to rest, where curiosity and peace coexist. If this resonates with you, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe. It helps these journeys continue, and it means we can explore more of these quiet mysteries together. Tonight, let's talk about snails. Not the garden pests or the escargot on fancy menus, but the real creatures, ancient, impossibly diverse, living secret lives in places and ways that challenge everything we think we know about what it means to be an animal. The first thing you need to understand about snails is how old they are. The first snails appeared in the oceans roughly 500 million years ago, during the Cambrian period when life was exploding into countless new forms. They were there before fish had jaws, before anything had crawled onto land, before the first forests or flowers or any of the familiar features of the world as we know it. And they made a choice, evolutionarily speaking, that would define their entire lineage. They grew shells. A snail's shell is not something it finds or inhabits, like a hermit crab. It grows the shell itself, secreting calcium carbonate from its mantle, a specialized organ that wraps around its body. The shell is part of the snail, as much a part of it as your skeleton is part of you. And it grows with the snail throughout its entire life, spiraling outward in patterns that follow mathematical principles, creating logarithmic spirals that appear throughout nature, in galaxies, in hurricanes, in the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower. The snail carries geometry on its back, carries a structure that's both protection and constraint, shelter and burden. And this shell matters profoundly because it allowed snails to survive in ways their soft-bodied relatives could not. When predators evolved, when the ocean became a more dangerous place, snails could retreat into their shells and seal the opening with a hard plate called an operculum. They could wait out danger, could persist when everything around them was being consumed. This strategy worked so well that snails survived every major extinction event Earth has experienced. They outlasted the trilobites, outlasted the dinosaurs, outlasted countless other lineages that rose and fell while snails simply continued, slowly, persistently, carrying their protective spirals through hundreds of millions of years. But here's something that deepens the mystery. That shell that protects them also limits them. It's heavy. It takes enormous amounts of energy to build and maintain. A snail must consume calcium constantly to keep growing its shell, must balance the protection it provides against the weight it adds, must somehow make the physics work. And they do. Snails have spread into nearly every habitat on Earth: oceans, freshwater, land, from mountaintops to ocean trenches, from tropical rainforests to Arctic tundra. They're on every continent, including Antarctica. They've colonized islands so remote that few other animals have reached them. They found ways to live in places that seem impossible for a creature carrying a heavy calcium shell on its back. Consider the desert snails. Living in places where water is scarce and temperatures swing wildly between day and night. These snails have evolved an extraordinary survival strategy called estivation, a kind of deep sleep that can last for years. When conditions are too dry, the snail retreats into its shell, secretes a membrane across the opening, and simply waits. Its metabolism drops to nearly nothing. It's not dead, not exactly alive in any active sense, but existing in a state of profound suspension. And it can stay this way for years. There are documented cases of desert snails waking up after 5 years of dormancy, when water finally became available. 5 years of waiting, of existing at the absolute minimum threshold of life, and then awakening when conditions improved, as if no time had passed at all. This ability to pause life, to wait out impossible conditions, has allowed snails to persist in environments that would kill most other animals. And it raises fascinating questions about consciousness, about experience, about what it means to be alive. What does a snail experience during those years of dormancy? Is there any awareness, any sense of time passing? Or is it simply absence, a gap in existence where the snail effectively doesn't exist until it exists again? We don't know. We can measure metabolism, can track chemical processes, but the subjective experience, what philosophers call qualia, remains inaccessible. And perhaps that's appropriate. Perhaps not everything about the inner lives of other creatures needs to be transparent to us. The snail keeps its secrets, existing in states we can observe but never truly understand. Which brings us to something equally mysterious about how snails move. They glide on a single, muscular foot that secretes mucus, creating a film between their body and the ground. This mucus is extraordinary stuff. It's both liquid and solid, depending on the forces applied to it. When the snail is still, the mucus is viscous, almost gel-like, adhering to surfaces. But when the snail contracts its foot muscles, generating waves that ripple from back to front, the mucus becomes more liquid, allowing movement. It's a non-Newtonian fluid, changing properties based on stress, and the snail is surfing on it, riding waves of its own creation across surfaces that would be impossible to cross otherwise. And this mucus allows snails to move across razor blades without injury, to climb vertical glass, to hang upside down on leaves or rocks. The adhesion is so strong that a snail can support many times its own body weight while hanging from a surface. Engineers have studied snail mucus trying to develop new adhesives, new materials that can bond and release on demand, that work when wet, that don't damage surfaces. The snail solved these problems millions of years ago, and we're still trying to understand exactly how. But snails are slow, famously slow. The fastest land snails move at about 0.03 miles per hour, meaning it would take a snail more than 30 hours to travel a single mile. This slowness seems like a disadvantage, and in many ways it is. Snails are vulnerable to predators, unable to escape danger through speed. But slowness also has advantages. It requires very little energy. A snail doesn't need to eat much because it's not expending energy on rapid movement. It can survive on sparse resources, can live in marginal habitats where faster animals would starve. Slowness becomes a strategy, a way of existing that prioritizes efficiency over speed, persistence over power. And this connects to something profound about different ways of being in the world. We value speed, productivity, constant motion. But the snail proposes a different model: slow, deliberate, patient, moving just enough, consuming just enough. Existing in a state of profound economy where every bit of energy is carefully allocated. There's something almost meditative about it, something that challenges our assumptions about what constitutes a successful life. Consider the snail's sensory world. They don't have eyes in the way we understand them, though some species have light-sensitive spots on their tentacles that can detect brightness and shadow. They experience the world primarily through touch and chemical sensing. Those tentacles are constantly testing the environment, detecting vibrations, sensing molecules in the air or water that indicate food or danger. A snail navigates by feel and smell, building a map of its environment through direct contact, through chemical traces left by other snails, through the texture of surfaces beneath its foot. And snails can find their way home. There are species of limpets, a type of snail with a flattened, cone-shaped shell, that leave their spot on a rock to graze on algae, then return to exactly the same position when they're done feeding. They wear a groove into the rock over time, creating a custom-fitted home site where their shell matches the rock's contours perfectly, providing better protection from waves and predators. How do they navigate back to this exact spot? They're following their own mucus trail, retracing their path using chemical signatures, finding their way home through a landscape of scent and texture that we cannot perceive. This navigation becomes even more remarkable when you consider the scale. A limpet might travel several feet from its home site to feed. For a creature an inch or two across, this is like you walking several miles. And then it returns, following a trail that might have been partially washed away by waves, that might cross the trails of other limpets, that requires maintaining a sense of direction and purpose, despite a brain that's smaller than a grain of rice. The cognitive capacity required for this is not negligible. The limpet is solving complex problems with extremely limited neural hardware, suggesting that intelligence, at least in terms of solving environmental challenges, doesn't require large brains or complexity. It requires adaptation, specialization, sufficient capacity for the specific problems an organism faces. And this brings us to the snail's brain, such as it is. Snails have ganglia, clusters of nerve cells, rather than a centralized brain. The largest ganglion is in the head region and coordinates sensory input and motor control. But there are ganglia throughout the body handling local processing. It's a distributed nervous system, more like a network than a hierarchy. And despite this simplicity, snails can learn. They can be trained to associate certain stimuli with food or danger. They show memory that persists across time. They make choices, demonstrate preferences, navigate complex environments successfully. There's something humbling about this. We tend to assume that consciousness, that meaningful experience, requires brains like ours, centralized, complex, large. But here's a creature with a fundamentally different neural architecture, so different that we can barely compare it to ours, and yet it navigates its world successfully, solves problems, persists. What does that suggest about the nature of mind, of awareness, of experience? Perhaps consciousness is not one thing but many things, not a hierarchy with humans at the top, but a vast space of different ways of processing information and responding to the world. Perhaps the snail, moving slowly across a leaf on a summer evening, is experiencing something. Not what we experience, but something nonetheless. Something valid and real in its own terms. Let's return to that iron snail we mentioned at the beginning, because its story reveals something extraordinary about adaptation. The scaly-foot snail lives near hydrothermal vents in the Indian Ocean, where superheated water rich in minerals pours out of cracks in the ocean floor. The water contains iron sulfide, which is toxic to most organisms. But this snail incorporates the iron sulfide into its shell, creating a three-layered structure with an outer layer that's literally made of iron. It's the only known animal that uses iron this way, and it's doing this at depths where the pressure is hundreds of times greater than at sea level, where no sunlight penetrates, where the temperature can swing from near freezing to over 700 degrees Fahrenheit within a few feet. Why would a snail need an iron shell? Protection from predators, most likely. There are crabs at these vents that crush other snails easily, but the scaly-foot snail's iron armor makes it much harder to break. Evolution found a solution using the exact material that was available in the environment. Toxic iron compounds that most creatures avoid, repurposed as armor. It's brilliant, efficient, the kind of solution that only millions of years of trial and error could produce. And this snail represents just one point in an enormous space of possibility that snails have explored over their 500 million year history. There are snails with shells so thin they're nearly transparent. There are snails with shells so thick and heavy they can barely move. There are snails that have lost their shells entirely, becoming what we call slugs, though this has happened independently in multiple lineages, suggesting that under certain conditions, being shellless is advantageous enough that different groups of snails have repeatedly given up the protection shells provide. Consider the cone snails, which are among the most venomous creatures on Earth. They're predatory snails that hunt fish, worms, or other mollusks, depending on the species. They have a harpoon-like tooth that they can shoot out from their proboscis, injecting venom that's so potent it can kill a human. The venom contains hundreds of different compounds, each targeting specific receptors in the nervous system of their prey. Some components cause paralysis, others cause pain, others disrupt cellular function at the most fundamental level. Each species of cone snail has its own unique cocktail of toxins, refined by evolution to work on their specific prey. And researchers are now studying these venoms because they contain compounds that could become powerful new medicines. Several drugs derived from cone snail venom are already in use or development. Painkillers that are far more effective than morphine, with fewer side effects. A creature that moves at a fraction of a mile per hour, that seems primitive and simple, has created some of the most sophisticated biochemistry on the planet. The snail, in its slowness, has had time to perfect poisons that we're only beginning to understand. But not all snails are predators or solitary wanderers. Some species are highly social, gathering in groups, following pheromone trails left by other snails, even engaging in behaviors that look like cooperation. Garden snails, for instance, tend to aggregate in specific resting sites, returning to the same locations night after night. They're not just happening to end up in the same place. They're actively choosing to be near other snails, responding to chemical signals that say, "This is a good place to rest. Others of my kind have been here." And then there's reproduction, which in snails is far stranger than you might expect. Most land snails are hermaphrodites, possessing both male and female reproductive organs. When two snails mate, they can both potentially fertilize each other, both lay eggs afterward. But the process is complex and involves something called a love dart, a sharp calcium structure that one snail will literally stab into the body of another during mating. The dart contains mucus that changes the reproductive tract of the receiving snail, making it more likely that the dart thrower's sperm will successfully fertilize eggs. It's a kind of sexual conflict happening at the molecular level, each snail trying to maximize its own reproductive success, even while cooperating with its partner. This reveals something important about evolution and about life more generally. Cooperation and conflict aren't opposites. They exist simultaneously, even in the same interaction. The snails need each other to reproduce, but they're also competing with each other to ensure their genes are the ones that get passed on. It's complicated, messy, nothing like the simple narratives we sometimes tell about nature. And it's fascinating precisely because it's complex. because it shows that even creatures we think of as simple are navigating social and biological dynamics that require sophisticated responses. There are snails in the ocean that don't eat at all after they become adults. They live off energy stored from their larval stage, spending their entire adult lives focused solely on reproduction. There are snails that can reproduce without mating, creating clones of themselves through parthenogenesis. There are snails that form chains, one snail mounting another, mounting another, mounting another, in what looks like an attempt by the snails in the middle to mate with multiple partners simultaneously. The diversity of strategies, of solutions to the problem of continuing your lineage, is staggering. And as you settle in and listen, as your breathing slows and your body relaxes into stillness, think about what this diversity represents. Snails have been experimenting with different ways of existing for 500 million years. Every species alive today is a success story, a lineage that found something that works, that solves the problems of survival and reproduction well enough to persist. Some are generalists, able to eat many different foods and live in many different places. Others are specialists, perfectly adapted to specific conditions but vulnerable if those conditions change. Both strategies work. Both have advantages and disadvantages. Nature doesn't prefer one over the other. It accepts whatever persists. And snails persist. They're on every continent, in every ocean, adapting to conditions as they change, slowly, patiently, carrying their spiraled shells through the centuries. They watched the dinosaurs rise and fall. They were there when the first mammals emerged, when the first flowers bloomed, when the continents drifted into their current positions. They're still here, still sliding through gardens on summer nights, still clinging to rocks in tide pools, still surviving in the deepest ocean trenches, where pressure would turn you into a compressed smear of organic matter. They endure. Rest now, and know that somewhere near you, probably closer than you think, a snail is moving through the darkness. It's following chemical traces you cannot detect, navigating terrain using senses you don't possess, existing in a temporality so different from yours that its entire journey tonight might cover a distance you'd walk in 3 seconds. And it's been doing this, or something very like this, since before your species existed, since before most of what you recognize as the living world came into being. The snail connects you to deep time, to patient persistence, to the strange beauty of creatures that succeed not through speed or strength or intelligence as we measure it, but through perfect adaptation to a specific way of being in the world. The spiral of a snail's shell follows what mathematicians call the golden ratio, approximately 1.618, the same proportion that appears in nautilus shells, in the arrangement of flower petals, in the structure of galaxies. This isn't coincidence. It's the most efficient way to grow, to add new material to an existing structure without changing the fundamental shape. Each new chamber the snail builds is larger than the one before it by this constant ratio, creating a logarithmic spiral that expands outward infinitely while maintaining its proportions. The snail is carrying mathematics on its back, geometry made flesh and calcium, a living demonstration of principles that govern everything from the microscopic to the cosmic. And this spiral grows in one of two directions, either clockwise or counterclockwise when viewed from above. Most species are consistently one or the other, though occasional individuals are born with reverse spirals. These reverse snails, called sinistral when the norm is dextral, or dextral when the norm is sinistral, face a unique challenge. Their reproductive organs are positioned differently because of the reversal, making mating with normally coiled individuals difficult or impossible. They're isolated by geometry, by an accident of development that makes them incompatible with the rest of their species. Some of these reversed individuals never reproduce. Others seek out the rare reversed partner, and if they succeed, their offspring tend to be reversed as well, potentially starting a new lineage defined by its mirror image architecture. This reveals something profound about how small changes can have enormous consequences. A single developmental shift in which direction the shell coils as the embryo grows, and suddenly you have an individual that's reproductively isolated from its entire species. It's not sterile, it's fully capable of reproduction, but finding a compatible mate becomes exponentially harder. And yet sometimes it happens. And when it does, when two reversed individuals find each other, they can potentially establish a new population, a new variation. Evolution doesn't plan these things. It simply accepts what works, what persists, what manages to reproduce despite the odds. But let's consider what the snail experiences as it builds its shell throughout its life. The mantle, that specialized tissue that secretes the shell material, is incredibly sensitive. It responds to damage by producing extra material to seal cracks, to repair breaks, to reinforce weak points. If you examine an old snail shell closely, you can often see the history of injuries written in irregular patches, thicker sections, places where the smooth spiral is interrupted by emergency repairs. Each mark tells a story: a close call with a predator, a fall from height, an encounter with sharp stones or harsh weather. The shell is both armor and autobiography, protection and record. And the colors, the patterns that make some snail shells so beautiful, these aren't decorative. They're produced by pigments laid down by the mantle as it secretes shell material. The patterns are often species-specific, allowing identification, but they also vary within species based on diet, environment, even individual variation. Some snails have shells that are muted browns and grays, perfect camouflage against bark or stone. Others have brilliant colors and patterns that seem conspicuous to us, but that blend perfectly into their specific habitat when viewed by their actual predators. The shell that looks striped and obvious to human eyes might be nearly invisible to a bird viewing it from above against dappled leaves and shadow. There are snails that can sense light through their shells. The shells are thin enough, translucent enough that light penetrates, and the snail can detect day and night, can respond to shadows passing overhead that might indicate danger. They're wearing a house that's also, in a limited sense, an eye. Another sensory organ adding to the information stream the snail processes as it moves through its world. Which brings us to the question of what snails eat, because their diets are far more varied than you might imagine. Most land snails are herbivores, grazing on algae, fungi, decaying plant matter. Their radula, a ribbon-like organ covered in tiny teeth, scrapes food particles off surfaces. If you've ever seen the silvery trail a snail leaves behind, you might also have noticed tiny marks on leaves where a snail has been feeding. The radula is strong enough to rasp through plant tissue, even through the tough outer layer of bark on trees. Some species can eat paper, cardboard, even certain types of plastic, breaking down materials that most animals cannot digest. But not all snails are gentle herbivores. Some are fierce predators, hunting other snails with methods that border on the horrific. The rosy wolf snail, for instance, is a specialist in hunting other snails. It follows their mucus trails with single-minded determination, tracking its prey sometimes for hours, and when it catches up, it inserts its mouth into the other snail's shell and consumes it alive. There's no quick kill, no mercy, just slow consumption while the prey is trapped in its own shell, unable to escape. Even stranger are the snails that have become parasitic. There are marine snails that attach to sea stars and slowly bore through their skin using acidic secretions, then insert a feeding tube into the sea star's body cavity and consume its internal fluids. The sea star continues living, continues moving, while the snail feeds on it like a vampire, taking just enough to sustain itself without killing its host immediately. It's a relationship of profound intimacy and horror. Predator and prey bound together, sometimes for months, until the sea star finally succumbs or manages to dislodge the parasite. These strategies reveal the extraordinary breadth of solutions snails have discovered to the fundamental problem of obtaining energy. Every possible food source has probably been exploited by some snail species somewhere. Plants, algae, fungi, bacteria, other mollusks, worms, fish eggs, carrion, even the mucus trails of other snails. There are snails in the deep ocean that farm bacteria in their gills, snails that feed on the chemosynthetic bacteria growing around hydrothermal vents. Life finds ways, and snails have found thousands of them. And then there's the question of how long snails live, which varies wildly by species. Some small snails live only a year or two, completing their entire life cycle quickly. Others, particularly larger species, can live for decades. There are documented cases of land snails living for 15, 20, even 25 years in captivity. A quarter century of slow progression through a world of scent and texture, of patient feeding and rare reproduction, of seasonal cycles repeated until the snail's body finally wears out or succumbs to disease or predation. What changes in a snail's experience over that time? Do they learn, accumulate knowledge about their environment? Research suggests yes, at least in limited ways. Snails can learn to associate certain locations with food, can remember dangerous areas and avoid them, can even show what looks like personality differences, some individuals being bolder, more exploratory, while others are cautious, staying close to familiar territory. These aren't conscious decisions in the way we make conscious decisions, but they're not pure instinct either. There's something in between, some form of basic cognition that allows flexible responses to environmental challenges. Consider what this means for a creature with such limited neural capacity. The entire nervous system of a snail contains maybe a few tens of thousands of neurons, compared to the roughly 86 billion neurons in a human brain. And yet with this minimal hardware, the snail accomplishes everything it needs to accomplish. Finds food, avoids danger, locates mates, navigates complex environments, repairs its shell, survives extreme conditions. It suggests that consciousness, awareness, whatever we want to call the inner experience of being alive, doesn't require vast computational power. It requires enough capacity for the specific problems an organism faces, and no more. There's an efficiency to this that's almost elegant. The snail is neither over-engineered nor under-engineered. It has exactly what it needs, no excess, no waste. Every adaptation serves a function. Every behavior solves a problem. And this has allowed snails to persist while more complex, more specialized creatures have vanished. Complexity is not always an advantage. Sometimes simplicity, efficiency, adaptability. These are what allow persistence across geological time. Which brings us to snails and evolution, to the role they've played in our understanding of how species change over time. Darwin himself collected snails, studied their distribution across islands, noticed how isolated populations developed distinct characteristics over time. The Galapagos snails, like the famous finches, showed variation from island to island, subtle differences in shell shape and size and color that reflected adaptation to local conditions. These observations contributed to Darwin's thinking about natural selection, about how populations diverge when separated, about the mechanisms that drive the origin of species. And snails continue to be important in evolutionary biology because they're everywhere, because they're diverse, because their shells preserve well and create a fossil record we can study. You can track changes in snail populations over thousands or millions of years, can see how shells change in response to climate shifts or the arrival of new predators. You can watch evolution happening in real time in some populations, seeing measurable changes over just a few generations when strong selection pressures are applied. There are snails in Polynesia, for instance, that have evolved into hundreds of distinct species on different islands, each adapted to specific microhabitats within already small islands. These radiations, the explosive diversification of one ancestral species into many descendant species, happen when snails reach isolated environments where competition is low and opportunities are abundant. Each valley, each mountain ridge, each slightly different forest type becomes home to a distinct species, and over time, an island that's only a few square miles might contain a dozen or more snail species found nowhere else on Earth. This makes islands both laboratories of evolution and conservation nightmares, because those endemic species found nowhere else, are incredibly vulnerable to extinction. Change their habitat, introduce a predator, and the entire species can vanish within years. This has happened repeatedly across the Pacific, where introduced rats and rosy wolf snails have decimated native snail populations. Entire species have gone extinct before they were even scientifically described. We know they existed only from empty shells collected decades ago, preserved in museum drawers. Silent testimony to diversity that once was and is no more. The extinction rate for land snails is staggering. Some estimates suggest that snails make up a disproportionate percentage of documented extinctions, not because they're particularly vulnerable to all threats, but because island endemics are vulnerable, and there are thousands of island endemic snail species. Each one represents millions of years of evolutionary history, a unique solution to the problem of existing in a specific place. And when they disappear, that solution is lost forever. The information encoded in their genes, the adaptations they developed, the role they played in their ecosystem, all gone. But let's not dwell only on loss. Let's return to the snails that persist, that thrive, that continue their slow progression through landscapes they've inhabited for millennia. There are freshwater snails in ancient lakes, Lake Tanganyika, Lake Baikal, that have been in those waters for millions of years, slowly diversifying, filling every possible niche. There are snails in caves that have evolved in darkness for so long that they've lost not just their eyes but their pigmentation, becoming pale, ghostly versions of their surface-dwelling ancestors. There are snails in hot springs, in salt lakes, in temporary pools that exist only during rainy seasons. Each environment has its snails, and each snail is exquisitely adapted to its particular environment. The adaptations aren't always obvious. Sometimes they're behavioral, knowing when to seal up and wait out dry periods. Sometimes they're physiological, kidneys that can handle extreme salinity, or lungs that can extract oxygen from water with very low dissolved oxygen. Sometimes they're structural, shells shaped to resist desiccation, or feet that can adhere to surfaces in strong currents. And these adaptations accumulate over generations, each small improvement preserved if it increases survival and reproduction, discarded if it doesn't. The process is slow, incremental, directionless. Evolution has no goal, no destination. It simply accepts what works right now, in this environment, for this population. The snails alive today are not better than their ancestors in any absolute sense. They're just better adapted to current conditions. If conditions change, different traits become advantageous, and the population shifts again. This is worth contemplating as you lie here in the quiet. Change is constant. Nothing is permanent, not even the seemingly stable forms that persist for millions of years. Snails have been remarkably conservative in their basic body plan. They're recognizably snails going back 500 million years. But, within that conservative framework, they've explored vast spaces of possibility, trying out thousands of different strategies, living in thousands of different ways. Consistency and variation coexist. The fundamental pattern remains while the details change endlessly. And perhaps that's a lesson worth carrying into sleep, into dreams, into the unconscious processing that happens when we rest. Some things persist. Some things are stable enough to provide continuity, to create the sense that there's something solid to hold on to. But within that stability, everything is always changing, always adapting, always responding to new conditions. The spiral continues outward, following its mathematical law. But each new chamber is unique, built in response to current conditions, incorporating materials available right now, protecting a body that's growing and changing and aging. The snail knows nothing of philosophy, nothing of metaphor. It's simply living, solving problems as they arise, moving forward one muscular contraction at a time. But in that simple living, in that patient persistence, there's something we can learn from. The value of slowness, of efficiency, of adaptation without anxiety, of continuing forward even when the destination is unclear or unknown. Rest now with that image. A snail on a leaf in darkness, its tentacles extended, testing the air for scent of food or danger. Its foot contracting in waves that pull it forward at a pace so slow it's almost imperceptible. Its shell spiraling above it like a galaxy in miniature. Its entire existence focused on this moment, this movement, this small piece of the endless journey that its ancestors began 500 million years ago, and that its descendants might continue for 500 million more. There's a species of snail in New Zealand that can survive being frozen solid, not just enduring cold temperatures, but actually freezing. Ice crystals forming in its tissues, its bodily fluids turning to ice, its metabolism stopping completely. And then, when temperatures rise, it thaws and simply continues living as if nothing happened. This ability, called cryopreservation in its natural form, challenges our understanding of what it means to be alive. Because for the hours or days that the snail is frozen, it's not metabolizing, not processing information, not doing anything we'd recognize as living. It's suspended between states, neither alive nor dead, waiting for conditions that allow life to resume. This connects to something fundamental about how snails have conquered extreme environments. They don't fight against harsh conditions. They endure them. They wait. When a desert snail seals itself inside its shell for years during drought, it's not trying to stay active in impossible conditions. It's accepting that this is not a time for activity, that survival sometimes means doing nothing at all, being nothing but a patient structure holding the possibility of life until circumstances improve. There's profound wisdom in that strategy, in knowing when to act and when to simply persist. And this waiting, this patience, has allowed snails to outlast creatures that were faster, stronger, more complex. There were trilobites in the ancient oceans that dominated the seafloor for hundreds of millions of years. Exquisitely adapted predators and scavengers with compound eyes and sophisticated nervous systems. They went extinct. Snails remained. There were ammonites with beautiful spiral shells, relatives of modern octopuses and squid, that filled ecological roles throughout the world's oceans for 350 million years. They vanished in the extinction that killed the dinosaurs. Snails survived. Time and again, when conditions change dramatically, when asteroid impacts or volcanic eruptions or climate shifts eliminated the dominant forms, snails were among the survivors, carrying their shells through the catastrophe and emerging into whatever world came after. What makes them so resilient? Partly it's their ability to enter dormant states, to survive when conditions are terrible by simply not being active. Partly it's their reproductive capacity. Many snails can lay hundreds of eggs, ensuring that even if most offspring die, some will survive. Partly it's their generalist nature. Most snails can eat a variety of foods, can tolerate a range of conditions, aren't locked into narrow ecological niches that become death traps when environments shift. But perhaps most importantly, it's their sheer diversity. With 60,000 species occupying almost every habitat on Earth, snails as a group are nearly impossible to eliminate completely. Whatever catastrophe occurs, some snails somewhere will find themselves in conditions they can tolerate, and those survivors will persist, will reproduce, will eventually spread and diversify again. This diversity isn't random. It's the accumulated result of hundreds of millions of years of snails encountering new environments and either adapting or going extinct. Every species alive today represents a lineage that successfully navigated countless challenges: climate changes, predator invasions, habitat alterations, competition from other species. The snails you see in your garden are winners of a lottery that's been running since before dinosaurs. Each one carrying genes that have proven, generation after generation, that they work, that they solve the problems of survival and reproduction well enough to continue. Consider the amber snail, a delicate creature with a shell so thin you can see through it, living in wetlands across North America and Europe. Its shell is minimal protection. A determined bird could crush it easily. But the amber snail's strategy isn't to resist predation through armor. It's to reproduce so prolifically, to live so quickly, that predators can't eliminate the population. An amber snail might live only 1 year, but in that year it will mate multiple times, lay hundreds of eggs, creating a surge of offspring that spreads through the marsh. Some will be eaten, many will die from other causes, but enough survive to maintain the population, to continue the lineage. This is a different strategy from the Greenland shark's centuries of life, but it's equally valid, equally successful in evolutionary terms. There's no one right way to exist. Fast reproduction with high mortality works. Slow reproduction with high survival works. The universe doesn't care which strategy you employ, as long as your lineage continues. And snails have explored both extremes and everything in between, finding success across an enormous range of life history strategies. But let's talk about snail mucus again, because we barely scratched the surface of how extraordinary this substance is. The mucus serves multiple functions simultaneously. It's lubrication, allowing movement across rough surfaces. It's adhesive, allowing the snail to cling to vertical or upside-down surfaces. It's a chemical communication system. Other snails can read information from mucus trails about the size, species, and reproductive status of the snail that left them. It's antimicrobial, containing compounds that inhibit bacterial and fungal growth, protecting the snail's vulnerable foot from infection as it slides across environments filled with pathogens. And the snail can vary the properties of its mucus depending on what it needs in the moment. When moving quickly, well, quickly for a snail, the mucus is thinner, more liquid, reducing friction. When stationary or moving slowly, it becomes thicker, more adhesive, providing better grip. When threatened, some species can produce mucus that's particularly thick and sticky, gumming up the mouthparts of attacking beetles or making it harder for birds to get a clean grip. The snail is constantly adjusting the biochemistry of its mucus in response to environmental conditions and behavioral needs, performing chemistry that we still don't fully understand. There are medical researchers studying snail mucus now because it contains compounds that promote healing. Some evidence suggests that snail mucus applied to wounds can speed healing, reduce scarring, even fight infection. Cosmetic companies have started using snail mucus in skincare products, claiming it has anti-aging properties. Whether these claims are fully substantiated is debatable, but what's undeniable is that snail mucus is a complex biological material refined by evolution to serve multiple critical functions. And we're only beginning to understand its full potential, which leads us to think about the countless small ways snails interact with their ecosystems, the roles they play that we rarely notice or consider. Snails are decomposers, breaking down dead plant material and returning nutrients to the soil. They're food for countless predators, birds, mammals, snakes, lizards, other invertebrates, all depend on snails as prey. They're pollinators in some ecosystems, visiting flowers to feed on nectar and carrying pollen between plants. They're seed dispersers, consuming fruits and excreting the seeds elsewhere, often in a nutrient-rich package of snail feces that helps the seed germinate. Remove snails from an ecosystem, and you'd see cascading effects. Dead leaves would decompose more slowly. Certain plants would lose their pollinators. Some predators would lose a major food source. The soil chemistry would change as nutrient cycling slowed. It wouldn't be immediate catastrophic collapse. Ecosystems are resilient. But it would be noticeable change. A shifting of balances that might eventually lead to very different community compositions. And yet we often view snails as pests, as problems to be eliminated. Gardeners wage war against them, deploying poisons and traps and barriers. Agricultural operations treat them as crop destroyers, spraying molluscicides to protect plantings. And yes, snails can damage gardens, can reduce crop yields, can carry parasites that affect livestock and humans. These are real concerns, but they're concerns that arise from human practices. Monoculture agriculture, ornamental gardens with plants from different continents, livestock densities that never occur in nature. We've created conditions that favor certain snail populations, then blame the snails for responding to those conditions. The brown garden snail, considered a major pest in many places, is actually native to the Mediterranean. It was intentionally introduced to other regions, brought to California in the 1850s for food, carried to Australia and other locations as escargot stock, or accidentally in shipments of plants. It thrived in its new environments because it found favorable conditions and few of its natural predators. Now it's naturalized across much of the world, impossible to eradicate, doing what snails have always done, eating available food and reproducing when conditions allow. We facilitated its spread, and now we spend enormous resources trying to control it. This pattern repeats throughout the world. Humans move species, intentionally or accidentally, and then struggle to manage the consequences. The rosy wolf snail, that predatory species we mentioned, was introduced to Hawaii and other Pacific islands in a misguided attempt to control the giant African snail, another introduced pest. Instead of controlling the giant African snail, the rosy wolf snail primarily ate native snails, slower, less wary species that had evolved in isolation without snail predators. The result was catastrophic for native snail diversity, with dozens of species driven to extinction, while the giant African snail remained largely unaffected. It's a lesson we keep learning and forgetting. Ecosystems are complex. Interventions have unintended consequences, and moving species around the globe creates problems we cannot fully predict or control. The snails themselves are blameless. They're simply doing what evolution programmed them to do: survive and reproduce using whatever resources are available. Our judgments about which snails are good or bad, native or invasive, beneficial or harmful, these are human categories, human values imposed on creatures that have no concept of borders or belonging or appropriate behavior. And perhaps as you lie here in darkness, relaxing towards sleep, it's worth considering what it would mean to see snails not as pests or problems, but simply as beings pursuing their own existence with the same legitimacy as any other life form. They're not trying to inconvenience you when they eat your lettuce. They're just eating. They're not being stubborn when they persist despite your efforts to eliminate them. They're just surviving, employing strategies that have worked for hundreds of millions of years. There's something almost admirable in that persistence, that absolute commitment to continuing regardless of obstacles. Think about the individual snail again, the singular creature moving across stone or leaf or soil. It hatched from an egg smaller than a grain of rice, emerged into a world that, to it, must seem infinitely large, filled with surfaces to explore and potential food, and dangers it can sense but not understand. It grew, adding chamber after chamber to its shell, each one marking time passing. Growth achieved, survival continued. It encountered other snails, mated perhaps, laid eggs that hatched into new snails, carrying its genes forward into another generation. And if it lived long enough, it grew old, its shell thicker but more scarred, its movements slower than when young, its body wearing out gradually as all bodies do. Eventually it stopped moving, stopped eating, and died. Its soft body decomposed quickly, returned to the soil, became nutrients for plants and microorganisms. But its shell remained, calcium carbonate preserved against decay, lasting months or years or even millions of years if conditions are right. That shell, empty now but still beautiful with its mathematical spiral, is all that remains to show this particular life existed. This particular snail made its journey through time and space, and now has ended. We find these empty shells all the time without thinking about what they represent. Not just a snail, but a life. A unique trajectory through existence. Problems solved and challenges met. And ultimately, the universal fate of mortality reached. Every empty shell is a story that's concluded, a narrative that had a beginning and middle and end, even though we never knew it was happening. The snail asked for nothing from us, required nothing but the minimal resources it found in its environment, and lived its life according to patterns established long before humans existed. There's something deeply peaceful about that. The snail's life doesn't need meaning beyond itself. It doesn't need to accomplish anything or prove anything or be remembered. It simply is, and then it isn't. And that's enough. In a world where we're constantly pressured to achieve, to produce, to matter in ways that are visible and measurable, the snail proposes a different model. Existence for its own sake. Life that's valuable simply because it's life. Movement forward not toward any grand goal, but just because moving forward is what living things do. Rest with that now. Let go of the need for purpose beyond existence. Be like the snail, present, patient, persistent. Your thoughts will spiral like the snail's shell, following their own mathematical logic, expanding outward into sleep and dreams. And somewhere outside, right now, snails are moving through darkness, leaving their silver trails, living their slow lives with the same seriousness and commitment that you bring to your faster one. They're not bothered by questions of meaning or purpose. They're simply being what they are, doing what they do, continuing the lineages that stretch back through incomprehensible time. And in the morning, you'll wake and they might still be there, or they might have retreated into shade and shelter, sealed themselves away to wait for night. Either way, they persist. And so do you. And that connection across vast differences, the shared fact of being alive, of continuing, of carrying forward into another day. That's worth acknowledging as you drift toward rest. There's a particular species of sea snail that lives its entire life drifting in the open ocean, never touching solid ground. The violet sea snail constructs a raft of bubbles, tiny air pockets trapped in mucus, and hangs upside down from this raft, floating at the surface where wind and currents carry it wherever they will. It feeds on jellyfish and other gelatinous creatures that also drift in the open ocean, and it has no control over where it goes, no ability to swim or steer. Its entire existence is surrender to forces beyond its control, trusting that the ocean will eventually bring it to food, to mates, to whatever it needs to survive. And somehow, impossibly, this works. The species persists, generation after generation of snails drifting on bubble rafts across thousands of miles of open water. This strategy seems precarious, almost foolish. What happens when storms come, when the raft breaks apart, when no food appears for weeks? And yet the violet sea snail has been employing this strategy successfully for millions of years. It reminds us that there are ways of existing we cannot imagine from our perspective, solutions to survival that seem impossible until we witness them actually working. The snail doesn't worry about control or security. It builds its bubble raft and trusts the ocean. And that trust, that complete acceptance of circumstances beyond its control, has proven sufficient. And this connects to something deeper about how snails relate to time. We experience time as a river flowing in one direction, carrying us from past through present toward future. We plan, anticipate, remember, worry about what's coming. But a snail exists almost entirely in the present moment. It responds to current conditions. Is there food here? Is it safe? Is it too dry? Without apparent concern for past or future. When a desert snail seals itself into its shell to wait out drought, it's not thinking, "I'll wake up when rain comes." It's simply responding to current dryness by entering dormancy. And when moisture returns, it responds to that by waking. No planning, no anticipation, just pure response to immediate conditions. There's something profoundly peaceful about this mode of existence. The snail is never anxious about the future because it has no concept of future. It's never burdened by regret about the past because it doesn't hold on to the past in the way we do. It simply is, in each moment, doing whatever that moment requires. And this has worked for 500 million years, which suggests that consciousness like ours, with its ability to project into future and dwell on past, isn't necessary for successful life. It's one strategy among many, useful for creatures like us who depend on complex social cooperation and tool use, but not inherently superior to the snail's eternal present. Consider what we can learn from this as you settle deeper into stillness. So much of our suffering comes from being anywhere but here, worrying about tomorrow, regretting yesterday, wishing things were different than they are. The snail cannot do any of these things, and perhaps that's not a limitation, but a kind of freedom. It accepts reality completely because it has no capacity to imagine alternatives. When conditions are favorable, it moves and feeds. When conditions are harsh, it waits. No judgment about whether conditions should be different. No complaint about unfairness. No resistance to what is. This isn't to say we should or could become like snails. Our human consciousness brings gifts as well as burdens. But there's value in considering what the snail's mode of being might teach us. Acceptance, presence, trust in the unfolding of circumstances, the willingness to wait when waiting is what's required, the commitment to continue, patiently, slowly, without knowing where you're going or why, just following the basic imperatives of survival and continuation. There are snails in caves that have been isolated from the outside world for millions of years. The caves they inhabit are essentially sealed systems, cut off from surface ecosystems with their own unique conditions. Constant temperature, complete darkness, limited food sources. The snails that live there have evolved in isolation, becoming distinct species found nowhere else on Earth. They've lost their eyes, lost their pigmentation, become pale ghosts of their surface-dwelling ancestors. Their metabolism has slowed to match the limited food available. They grow more slowly, reproduce less frequently, live longer. Patient creatures in a patient darkness. What is it like to be a snail in perpetual darkness? In a cave system that hasn't seen sunlight in geological ages. There's no day or night, no seasons, no external changes to mark the passage of time. Just endless darkness, the rough texture of stone, the chemical traces of food growing on rock surfaces, the occasional encounter with another snail. Its existence stripped to its absolute essentials: feeding, surviving, occasionally reproducing. And yet it's a full life to the snail experiencing it, as complete and valid as any other life, perhaps even more focused, more pure in its simplicity. These cave snails remind us that life adapts to whatever conditions exist, finds ways to persist in places that seem impossible. And once adapted, those places become home, become normal, become the entire world from the perspective of the creatures living there. The cave snail doesn't miss sunlight because it has no concept of sunlight, no memory of a world different from its dark home. It's perfectly content, or at least perfectly functional, in conditions that would seem like deprivation to us. And this raises questions about contentment, about what constitutes a good life. We assume that more stimulation, more options, more experiences are always better. But the cave snail suggests otherwise. It has very little, very limited food, very limited sensory input, very limited variety in its existence. And yet it persists, generation after generation, seemingly no worse off than snails in resource-rich environments. Perhaps having enough is actually enough. Perhaps more than enough doesn't necessarily improve well-being, at least past a certain threshold. Perhaps simplicity has its own completeness. Let's return to the question of snail consciousness one more time, because it's central to how we understand these creatures and our relationship to them. When you look at a snail, you're seeing an animal with ganglia instead of a brain, with maybe 20,000 neurons total, no centralized processing center, no structures analogous to our cortex where we imagine consciousness resides. And yet the snail navigates complex environments, makes choices, learns from experience, shows individual variation in behavior. Something is happening in that distributed network of neurons, some kind of information processing that allows flexible responses to environmental challenges. Is the snail conscious? The question might be wrong, might be based on human-centric assumptions about what consciousness is. Perhaps there's not one consciousness, but many kinds. A spectrum from the simple awareness of a snail detecting light and shadow through its shell, to the complex, self-reflective awareness we humans experience. Perhaps consciousness isn't all or nothing, but comes in degrees, and the snail has exactly as much as it needs. Enough awareness to respond appropriately to its environment, to learn what helps survival and avoid what threatens it, but not the kind of complex meta-awareness that would serve no function in its life. What we can say with certainty is that the snail experiences something. It senses the world through multiple channels. It processes that sensory information and produces behavioral responses. It has states that look like preference, moving towards some stimuli and away from others, spending more time in some locations than others. Whether there's any subjective experience accompanying these processes, whether there's anything it's like to be a snail, remains mysterious, perhaps ultimately unknowable. But the mystery itself is worth contemplating, worth honoring. The snail keeps its inner life private, if it has one. And we must accept that privacy, that fundamental unknowability of other minds, even minds so different from ours. And as you lie here now, your own consciousness beginning to soften as sleep approaches, you might notice how your awareness changes. The clear, focused attention of waking consciousness starts to blur. Thoughts become less linear, more associative. The boundary between what's real and what's imagined becomes permeable. You're moving toward a state where consciousness functions differently, where the rules that govern your waking mind no longer fully apply. And in that transition, you're perhaps experiencing something closer to how other forms of consciousness might work. Less verbal, less analytical, more sensory and emotional and immediate. The snail lives in a state that might be closer to your dreams than your waking thoughts. Pure sensation, pure response, without the narrative overlay that makes human experience feel like a story with a protagonist and plot. The snail is not the hero of its own story because it has no story. Just a continuous present of sensation and response, movement and stillness, hunger and satiation, safety and threat. No past to regret, no future to fear. No self to defend or promote or worry about. Just being. In the most basic sense of that word. There's a Buddhist concept called beginner's mind, approaching each moment as if for the first time, without preconceptions, without the weight of accumulated knowledge and expectation. The snail embodies this perfectly. Each moment is fresh because the snail doesn't carry much from previous moments. It cannot plan or anticipate or dread. It meets whatever arises with the totality of its being, responds as fully as its simple nervous system allows, and then moves to the next moment, unencumbered by what just happened. We cannot fully adopt beginner's mind. Our consciousness is built differently, retains information, projects into future, learns in ways that make forgetting the past impossible. But we can appreciate the snail's mode of being, can recognize it as valid, as successful in its own terms, as a kind of wisdom even if it's not conscious wisdom. The snail has solved the problem of existence in its own way, and that solution has proven remarkably durable, surviving conditions and changes that eliminated countless other solutions. And now, as this journey through the world of snails draws toward its close, let's acknowledge what we've explored together. We've seen snails with iron shells in the deepest ocean, snails on bubble rafts in open water, snails sealed in their shells waiting for rain that might not come for years, snails in caves that have never seen light, snails laying love darts and hunting each other and farming bacteria and surviving being frozen solid. We've considered their ancient lineage, their mathematical spirals, their mucus trails like silver writing on the world, their patience that outlasts almost everything else. And through all of this, one truth emerges. The snail persists, slowly, carefully, carrying its burden and its protection on its back, leaving its trail across surfaces both rough and smooth. The snail continues. It's been continuing for 500 million years. It will likely continue for millions more, adapting as needed, persisting as always, patient witness to whatever changes come. There's something deeply reassuring about that continuity. The world changes. Empires rise and fall. Species come and go. Continents drift and climates shift. And through it all, snails keep moving forward at their own pace, untroubled by the chaos around them, focused only on the immediate necessities of survival. They're not trying to change the world or improve it or control it. They're simply living in it, accepting what comes, doing what they've always done. As you drift now towards sleep, imagine yourself as a snail, not literally but in spirit, carrying what you need, leaving behind what you don't, moving at your own pace regardless of pressure to go faster, trusting that the path will provide what's necessary when it's necessary. The snail doesn't worry about arriving because it has no destination, only the journey, only the slow progress from here to there to somewhere else, following chemical traces and instinct, and the basic imperative to continue. Your thoughts are slowing now, spiraling like a snail's shell, following their own logic into quieter and deeper places. The day's concerns are receding, becoming less urgent, less real. You're entering your own kind of dormancy, your body sealing itself away from the world for a few hours of rest and restoration. And when you wake, the snails will still be out there, still moving through their patient lives, still carrying forward lineages older than almost everything else. Rest now in that knowledge. The snails don't need you to understand them or help them or fix them. They simply need what they've always needed: space to exist, resources to sustain them, time to continue their ancient patterns. And in their continuation, in their persistent, slow movement through time and space, they offer us something valuable. A reminder that success isn't always fast or loud or obvious. That survival sometimes means knowing when to move and when to wait. That carrying your home on your back has both costs and benefits. And that patience, real patience, measured in geological time, outlasts almost everything else. If this journey resonated with you, if you found value in exploring the quiet mysteries of these ancient creatures, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. There are more journeys ahead, more quiet explorations of the profound and overlooked, and having you along makes them more meaningful. Sleep well now. Dream of silver trails across stone, of spirals expanding outward forever, of creatures so patient they measure time in centuries, of lives lived entirely in the present moment, without regret or anticipation. The snails are out there, moving through darkness, leaving their marks on the world in ways that will last long after everything else has faded. And you're here, part of the same earth, the same long story of life persisting despite everything. Continuing forward one moment at a time, slow and steady, and ultimately unstoppable. Rest now. The spiral continues. And that's enough.